Hello and welcome to A Word with Ward, a podcast focused on the high-growth world of data centers. In Series 1, I speak with some of the most prominent entrepreneurs of the industry. Those who've either already founded, scaled and exited businesses in this space, or who are currently on that journey. If you've got an interest in the industry, these are the people that you're going to want to hear from. I think I'm going to learn a thing or two along the way, and if you give it a listen, you might too. Today I'm joined by Darren Webb, co-founder and CEO of Evolution Data Centers, a developer and operator of Colo and Build to suit data centers, which is headquartered in Singapore and focused entirely on challenging emerging markets in Southeast Asia. Starting out in the telco industry in the UK over 25 years ago, Darren has worked in all aspects of the digital infrastructure ecosystem and has been in Asia for over 12 years. Before starting Evolution, he was the MD for Asia for IO Data Centers, where he led the Singapore business, ultimately to a cash flow positive exit a few years back. Okay, so good morning, Darren. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ward. Thank you for the opportunity to come on your podcast.
Yeah, great. And last time we spoke, I think you just climbed Kilimanjaro. So how was that? And have you recovered from that yet?
My legs have just about recovered. It's my 50th birthday. I got to the summit with my daughter and one of my best friends from young and his daughter. So it was quite cool to do it with them. I'm sure there's lots of analogies you could take from business, but the really interesting thing was that going up was challenging, tough but doable. Coming down was really hard. So I'm not too sure what the analogy is there, but I certainly don't want to come down a mountain again.
Yeah, great. Okay. And I was looking at LinkedIn earlier today, and it looks like Evolution Data Centers is either about to or has recently celebrated a birthday too. So, congratulations on 3 years in business.
Yeah, thanks, Ward. It is 3 years actually. I kind of started the business. I was in a hotel room in Singapore in COVID lockdown, so I'm still not sure whether I just lost the plot, decided to give up a steady job, and go and try and do something ourselves. So COVID has a lot to resonate with us, but it was kind of the defining point in deciding to go and start Evolution. So yeah, that's 3 years, and we're still very early in our journey. So we're still effectively in startup mode, and I think I'll probably miss the day when we don't consider ourselves a startup anymore, because I think there's an energy and an enthusiasm, a naivety about being in that kind of early stage, and I think I'll be sad if and when we get to the kind of the more corporate stage.
Yeah. Okay. And look, I'm always interested in hearing why founders often have such a burning desire to become an entrepreneur. So can you maybe talk to me around the motivations that led to you doing it? And also, you have already mentioned this, but I did want to know that if a startup isn't challenging enough, why you decided to do it in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's that famous saying, if not now, then when? And I certainly think there's some validity to that. But, being an entrepreneur, I think it's not a symbol, it's a state of mind, I think. So, having looked back on my life, not just my career, on my life, there was clearly entrepreneurship in there somewhere. I remember probably being 9 or 10 in the UK and decided to sell. I didn't want some of my toys anymore, so I set up a wallpaper table outside my house on the street and sold some toys to reinvest in new toys. And you could argue, kind of in hindsight, that's entrepreneurial, right? And so, I guess it was always there. And in the jobs I'd done, even in the corporate world, as I look back towards the end, more of them were focused on new things. So going into new markets with new products, building new teams. So, for instance, I set up a business for Vodafone Global Enterprise in Dubai from nothing. So, there's even in corporate world, you have an entrepreneurial mindset, I guess. But as I said, having been in the data center world for some time, in as a corporate employee, effectively as an employee for IO data centers, running the Singapore business, seeing that business through from not being in the best financial health, talk about the Singapore asset being in the best financial health, up to exiting that business, when it was better than cash flow positive. It kind of sparked something in me, I think, and it was that, during COVID, it kind of came to the forefront of, at my stage of career, at my stage of life, it feels like it's the time to now go and try and do something for myself and for my family. And so, COVID has a what did it give us? It gave us a lot of time to think. In hindsight, right? Whether it was hours in your bedroom, locked in, working, or going for long walks on your own or with your partner, so it gave me a lot of time to think, and I decided that I wanted to do it. I co-founded the business with Ed. We come from very different worlds. He comes from the banking financial world, and actually how it started, he introduced me to a successful entrepreneur. I won't name them here, but a successful entrepreneur, and we had literally 2 beers, I think, and I walked out, and Ed said, "Look, I can help you raise money to start a platform." And I kind of said, "Look, if I'm going to do it, you can do it as well." And so over a space of a few months, we kind of talked more and more, to the point where we decided we had complementary skills, complementary contacts, complementary talents that could, get us credible in that financial raise, which is not easy, and also credible in the customer space, which, so combining those two things put us in a decent position. So, it's still very early days, and as I said, that there's still plenty of challenges to come. But that entrepreneurial thing, I think for me, has always been there, and I can kind of look back on a number of things to say, okay, that was somewhat entrepreneurial. So again, I don't think it's a symbol, and I'm not really sure I'm comfortable being called an entrepreneur per se. But I certainly like, the thought of being a challenger. Every role I've done, I've kind of wanted to set myself up as a challenger to something or to someone or to another organization. And I think that kind of, that spikes my internal competitive nature. So that's kind of a long, convoluted way of saying that's how evolution was born.
Great. And you've touched on the capital side there, and sounds like Ed's the person who leads that. But we work with both investors and developers in this space, and I do find the capital side of the industry very interesting. Probably a lot of that is simply because the numbers are consistently and increasingly mind-boggling. But you've got the backing of one of the most high-profile and credible investors in the world. You've got a really strong track record in Asia. Can you talk to me around what you were looking for in a capital partner? And for those of us who've never been through a process like that, talk about what that process actually looks like.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, in hindsight, it makes me smile to think of the start of that process, because we had a couple of PowerPoint slides, and like you said, Ward, you're not asking people for $1,000 or $10,000 or even $100,000. The reality of our world now is it's so capital intensive that there's a huge barrier to entry. If a founder had the money needed to build a data center, I'd argue that founder needs to go and find a beach somewhere and some cocktails, right? Because if you've got hundreds of millions in your bank account, you probably don't need to go through the pain, right? So the reality of our industry now is you have to have a capital partner. I mean, there's just no alternative if you want to build and operate data centers. Some of these ticket prices now for a single build can be hundreds of millions, can be $1 billion, right? And that's only going to go up as we see the AI happen across the world. So what was the process? So I mean, the beauty of Ed and I coming together was clearly he came from that world. So he spoke their language. I didn't, and I had, of course I had to learn and continue to learn. It's his world. So, he could speak in their language. What I could do is portray the market and the opportunity and the customer profile. So, I hope that appeared credible when we brought that combination to the potential capital partners. We were fortunate, although that's not a word I like too much, because I think you kind of create some of your own fortune. But we were fortunate in the sense of we had access to them. So if another founder more with my kind of background came to the market on their own, I'm not saying they can't do it at all, but they're having to bridge two worlds, right? And that's not easy, right? To sit from both the customer and the market point of view, and also from the financial world point of view. So, and I'm sure some, you had Guy on here before, and that's probably someone that absolutely can. So there are people that can, but it's probably reasonably rare. So, we had the opportunity to meet with pretty much all the big guys, I would say, and some said, frankly, you're too early stage, and you have to get resilient to hearing that comment. You don't necessarily agree, but in hindsight, they were absolutely right. You had a couple of PowerPoints. Some, said come back when you've kind of brought on the business a bit further, and that was okay. So we didn't have any negative experiences. We had some great input from some people, but we got to the point where we had, frankly, a few big funds that expressed considerable interest in us. And we had to go through that beauty parade, and we had to decide, which one. Ultimately, we got to the point of having to decide between two, at kind of, in the final stages. Warburg's an interesting story, actually. As you've said, really credible fund, top 10 global PE fund. Great experience with data centers, not just with the Pan Asian one, but also they have one in China as well. So they understand the digital infrastructure space, and they also understand the markets we go into. And so I'll kind of come back to that. So Warburg, kind of indirectly, I'd been approached a couple of times to speak to Warburg, and I decided I didn't actually want to too much, because they had another platform in Asia. That I had some experience of, and frankly, I had concerns about sitting in the same stable as that other operator. But they were persistent. By the way, I'm not suggesting they were desperate, but they were persistent in asking to talk to us. And we were quite far down the line of another fund at that point. But we met with Warburg, we met with Andrew, and there was two things that really impressed me, other than their track record, of course. One was, they were clear on how they would manage us, and keep some internal separation between us and that other platform, which was important to me. But more importantly, that we talked about the markets we were going to, and they knew those markets, right? They knew those markets really well. So Philippines, for instance, they'd been a large investor in Converge. In Thailand, they have relationships there across a number of their portfolio companies, and in Vietnam, which was one of a kind of very ambitious market for us, they knew that market inside out. They've got, again, a number of opcos across a number of different industries, and so they knew our market, so we weren't having to sell them too hard why these markets, and the cherry on the cake was, and I think this is fair if you ask them, why did they choose Evolution? Because we were so obsessed, and I think that's probably the right word, with sustainability, with making sustainability the core of our business, and that's kind of where Evolution came from as a name, to say, my view was that the industry needs to evolve, and we can talk about what does that mean, but certainly in terms of how it designs and operates more sustainable data centers, and particularly the use of renewable energy. So Evolution was deliberately named to kind of say, look, the industry's got to where it's got to. It's been very successful, but there's an inevitable evolution that needs to happen across the industry, certainly in Asia. So yeah, we ended up going with Warburg. We're a year and a half pretty much into that relationship, and they've been fantastic. They've been incredibly supportive. They haven't, I'm not sure I had anything to particularly compare them against, but they've not been intrusive in terms of the business. They said they've been supportive. They've challenged, certainly. They have high expectations, and rightly so. No higher than I do for ourselves for the business. So we're really well aligned. And it's been a enjoyable but also challenging process, and it should be. And so, our job now is to prove them right, and to make sure that we execute on our projects, and we build a kind of a very exciting platform against very exciting markets.
Yeah, and then I'm glad you moved on to the sustainability element there, because that is my next question. Look, I know you're very passionate about sustainability, and in particular the way a lot of the industry deals with that challenge. So much so, I have heard you say on another podcast that it grinds your gears a little bit. I'm not sure if they were your words or the host's words, but yeah, I've also heard you talk about the fact that you don't think there's such a thing as a quote unquote green data center. Yeah, I hope I'm not misrepresenting you anyway there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but can you unpack that for me a little bit? And feel free to let off a few truth bombs if you see fit.
You're only misrepresenting me, because grind my gears is probably not something I would say. There was probably some expletives in there, but nothing. So look, for me, you can't, if you, the industry has taken this. I'm generalizing, of course. There are absolutely exceptions to this. There are absolutely some operators doing some great stuff. But so when I say the industry, I'm talking about a big chunk, but not all. To the kind of suggestion that yesterday or last year we were brown, in the sense that we were all buying off the grid, and it kind of suddenly sneaked up on us that was bad and it was coal based, but there there was no alternatives. That's kind of okay, right? The history is the history. The grids were coal based, and renewable energy, I'm not suggesting is a new thing, but certainly at a kind of scale that data centers have got to, there's an inevitability that if you're that much of an off taker, you're going to become a serious buyer to energy, whether it's brown or green. So the history doesn't really bother me. What kind of bothers me is this jump from, okay, we acknowledge we were brown, but we bought some carbon credits and now we're green. And I'm like, what? How did we do that? How do we make that jump? How do we position that to ourselves? How have we fooled ourselves into believing that buying some carbon credits has solved emissions? So carbon credits largely, and again, generalization, carbon credits largely can be abused and misused very, very easily. So you buy some carbon credits. You're an operator in Singapore, and frankly, some of the biggest operators are guilty of this, and perhaps it's not a word they would agree with, but guilty of this, which is saying their data centers in Singapore are 100% renewable energy. Well, they're not. They're certainly not, because why? Well, there's not enough renewable energy in Singapore. There's a little bit of solar, so that's pretty much tapped out by one data center or couple. And we're talking about people with 30, 40, 50 megawatt data centers. Where did they get the energy from? They didn't. They bought some carbon credits. And rather than being transparent and saying, well, look, actually, the reality is in Singapore, I can't get green energy because it just doesn't exist, right? I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with that transparency. But this kind of suggestion that, well, I'm a good guy because I'm green, right? I've got a green data center. I bought some carbon credits. Come on, guys. I mean, that's not solved emissions. So if you're applying them in, Singapore, where I am today, our air quality is pretty good. We do suffer from summer haze from a neighbouring country when they burn some crop, which is incredibly unfortunate. But generally we've got pretty good air quality. But if you go across to some of our neighbouring markets, it can be awful. And people are living in that, right? Kids are growing up in that. And if you look at the stats, then clearly that's leading to later life serious diseases, right? So, we've got a part to play in that. So my point being, if you've bought some carbon credits in the US because they're cheaper there, and you've applied them to your data center in Jakarta, as an example, please tell me how the emissions have changed at all out of your Jakarta data center, because you have a piece of paper on your wall saying, I've got a green data center. Sorry, but I'm going to call bullshit on that, and say you haven't, what you've done is to make yourself feel good at your board level that you are a good corporate citizen. Now, again, right, I've got to be careful, because where there's not renewable energy, what do you do? And that's not an easy question to solve. But my point being, be transparent, right? Be transparent to say, I bought these carbon credits, and I've also done my research. I've done my background checking. I know that money is being sent on to new renewable energy. So whilst I can't solve the emissions today, I am investing into this country's new renewable energy going forward in the future, as an example, or a neighboring country. So at least it has some aspect of doing something for the community in which you operate in. I don't see how buying a credit in the US does anything for people in Jakarta, right? And that's just an example. So, evolution is not saying we can solve that problem. We're not going to solve it. What we are going to do, and what we have done, is not take the easy option, right? And frankly, most people have taken the easy option. Right, so for instance, this week, Ward, I'll give you a bit of an early heads up. I'm sure this podcast will go out after this announcement. In 2 days, on the 14th of March, we will release an MOU to secure future renewable energy in both Thailand and Vietnam. I can only think of one other operator, a big operator, that has kind of announced something similar but smaller scale last month, and they've been in the market for years, and they're a big operator, right? So. And that's to their credit, because they've now started to do it. But my point being, little evolution has gone and done something that big operators can't do. Why? Because we took the hard road, right? We took the hard option, which was to go and build relationships with generators, right? With new renewable energy generators who are bringing new additive power onto that market in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And we've created a commercial arrangement to say, as that power comes onto the market, we have first right of refusal for it. So we can't solve it today. So Thailand's a great example. The regulatory position doesn't allow you to buy or easily allow you to buy renewable energy. It has to be sold from the generator to the grid, and then you buy it from the grid. At that point, you've lost some of the benefit, not entirely, but you've lost some of the benefit. So we need regulatory changes to happen. And here's another example where evolution has been part of something, not the creator of something. So you may have seen that the CEO Council was set up in Thailand. Again, evolution certainly wasn't the originator, but we were very happy to be part of it. And there's 5 companies that are part of that. It was led by STT, to their credit. And the idea there is to work with government, and the chairman is from the government ecosystem, to start influencing government policy to allow for a number of aspects, but most importantly and most passionately to me, for data centers, not evolution, for all data centers to have access to allow them to buy green energy directly from the generator, even if it uses the grid as transmission, to buy it directly from the generator. Why? Well, because it obviously gives us access to green power or greener power. It also puts pressure on the grid, right? Because you're basically saying to the grid at that point, who generally are government owned, so there's interesting dynamic there, but you're also saying to the grid, I don't want your power. I may have to take your transmission, but I don't want your power. So why don't you go and why don't you take some of that investment that's going into coal today and put it into new fuel sources, which is what these other people have done. So for me, it's a kind of win-win for everyone. And the customer set that we target, clearly have their own very public statements in terms of targets they want to achieve, whether it's 2035 or 2040. And this is across both, US and Chinese cloud companies, that they need to hit certain targets, right? And so we want to be on the right side of that debate, right? Which is, we're not perfect, because perfect doesn't exist, but we are taking hard options to try to secure green power, because we believe fundamentally over the next 2 to 3 years, that won't be a nice to have, that will be a must have, because at scale, it's very hard that the kind of the contradiction of saying one of these organizations, I've got these targets, but I've just built a 50 megawatt data center somewhere and it's coal based. For me, that's a huge contradiction, because that's a lot of power, right? And so it's going to effectively alter their ability to hit their target. So I believe the world is changing, and people will start locating data centers where renewable green energy exists, whereas today it's a nice to have.
Thanks for listening to A Word with Ward. We're not funded by anyone, so we don't have any hidden agenda. We're just talking to some of the most interesting people in data centers. We have had a little help in preparing some of the questions in Series 1 from 6 Sense Consulting, a team of business psychologists and executive coaches based in the UK, who we partner with when delivering our executive search assignments. Before the break, we were talking to Darren about why he thinks the industry in general needs to be a bit more transparent if it's going to truly tackle some of the challenges it faces regarding sustainability. Next, we're going to find out what we can expect to see from Evolution in 2024, and talk about some of the sacrifices he's making as an entrepreneur in order to achieve his ambitions for him and his family. Very well, I think it's a really refreshing way to talk about this subject, and congratulations on doing that deal. I'll look forward to that announcement over the next couple of days. You've mentioned 2 or 3 markets already, but can you talk to me about what we could all expect to see from Evolution data centers in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, this year is really simple. I love simple strategy. This year is execution. It's one word. It's execution. We spent 3 years getting to this point of having 2 markets that are absolutely shovel ready. That lovely phrase in our industry. So sites secure, power secured, green energy largely secured in terms of future. Great local partners in 2 markets. So we've done an incredibly good job. I was going to say fortunate, but it's not fortunate. Incredibly good job of securing great local partners in both Thailand and Philippines. These are partners is another phrase that's overused in our world. If you have a landlord and you're their tenant, people call that a partnership. I'm not too sure that's a partnership. There's no shared risk reward in that model. These are huge, big organizations, publicly listed organizations that are equity investors into the opco. So we have no interest in just having a landco as an example. We want those partners to come in and care about the operating side of the business. So if we have an issue at sites, if you have an issue with power, issue of connectivity, if we need to influence local or central government, we rely on our local partners to take on some of that. So our job this year is to do 2 things: to execute in Philippines and Thailand, and also to close down our first entry point into Vietnam, which we will hopefully announce quite shortly. So this year is about taking all the hard work of the last 2 to 3 years, all of that planning, all of that kind of stealth work, and now bring it to market. And what does success look like? It looks like building 2 data centers and the market entry being confirmed into Vietnam. And then by the end of the year, we've got 3 markets, under construction or under development, and that's enough for now. Actually, Ward, we're a small team with big aspirations, but a small team, and I kind of realized a few months ago I was particularly probably driving the team mad. I'm sure I still do, but looking at new markets, wanting to bring on new challenges, and the reality is the quality starts dropping, right? We can only be in so many markets at one time with a small team and do a quality job. And I truly believe the reason why we won some of those local partners, and that is the correct terminology, is because we were there, we were present. We were there. If they needed us back next week, we were there next week. We were going during COVID. And so, some of the people we were competing against hadn't been to those markets, just talking to them from afar. So, you can't sustain that 4, 5, 6 times at that level. So this year is simply about execution. And then, you take some time to consolidate as those construction projects come into into operations. And then, you know, of course, always got one slight bit of one eye on on other markets and other opportunities in our existing markets. You know, we don't want to be a single site in any market. You know, the markets we've chosen, certainly Thailand and Philippines, there's absolutely no reason why you can't have an ambition to be either the biggest pure IDC player or number 3 in the market if you include the telcos. There's no reason why we can't achieve that. So, you know, our aim, as I said, is not to have single site in any market. Is to go deep into certain markets as the market opportunity presents itself. And I would say Thailand certainly is showing signs of that. So execution, and then a kind of stage of consolidation, and then go again, right? And then we might be in a different stage of our journey because, you know, our profile is different than at that point. You know, we can't call ourselves a startup anymore. So, you know, the journey will change, right? And that's why, you know, I like to say, and to the frustration of the team, no doubt, we're always climbing mountains, because even as you get to the top of one, you look over the peak and there's another one behind it, and you kind of have to be resilient enough to go, okay, we need to go again, right? And we need to. There's a different stage of our journey to hit, and we'll never be finished. So, this year is all about execution. I want to come into next year with 3 markets that are very clearly defined projects, and then, you know, we'll go again then.
Great, and I'm glad you talked about resilience there, Darren. You know, I'm interested in the process of entrepreneurship, but I'm also very interested in the human side of it. Can I ask if you feel as though you're making any, you know, sacrifices for the business in other areas of your life, and, you know, if you do, you know, can you talk to me about why you're willing to make those kind of sacrifices?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and a very personal one, but I'm happy to answer it. For me, I'm making the biggest sacrifice that I could possibly make, which is that when we started the business, you know, my 2 older daughters had already moved back to the UK. You know, they finished their studies and moved back to the UK after a long time living in Singapore. But my wife and my young son were still here in Singapore. We took the decision in, and it was multifaceted. The decision, it wasn't simply about evolution, but evolution was a key part of it. Was to move them back to the UK. So, you know, from that's now coming up to 2 years. So it means I spend extended periods away from my family. And you know, that's the biggest sacrifice I can make. And, you know, do I ask myself every day whether it's worth it? Yeah, every morning, every night, I ask myself if it's worth it. And not every day and every night I say yes, because, you know, the reality is, Ward, no matter how successful evolution is or isn't, I will never get that time back with my family. You know, it's gone. You know, and so, you know, even the potential pot of gold at the end of the rainbow doesn't buy that time back, right? So, and so, yeah, it's definitely tough, you know, being away for 6-7 weeks at a time, and then spending a week or so with my family, and then back to Asia. So I use it as, you know, as much as it hurts, it's also fuel, right? You know, I'm the sort of person that needs fuel, right? I actually work better when there's something annoying me. I know that might sound strange, but I certainly work better when there's something that's challenging me internally to get up and fight. You know, even evolution, you know, we get some lovely messages from people who I respect, say, you know, you guys seem to be doing a good job, and I'm always careful to say, look, we've got a long way to go, but thank you. But we've also had indirectly, you know, people saying you're not going to make it, right? And you know, you're going to fail, and you're not going to raise money. They were wrong there. You're not going to be able to get local partners. They were wrong there. But it's fuel, right? And I love the fact that we can use evolution, or I can use the business as a way to prove people wrong. You know, that's satisfying. But yeah, at a personal level, toughest decision I've ever made. Something that I have to live with every day. You know, I'm so grateful to my wife, particularly because, you know, she's effectively a single mum, right? And even though we're still very much together, she's a single mum for weeks, if not months at a time. And for my son, you know, he's coming up 13 in a couple of weeks. As I said, you know, I will probably never forgive myself for missing this period of his life. but we made a call, right? We sat down and we made a call that, I wanted to do evolution. They wanted to support me. And this was the reality of the best way to do it. The added pressure of them being here for the last 2 years, frankly, when money was incredibly tight, the business was self-funded along with Ed for 2 years. And we started bringing employees on, so we're not just not making money ourselves or going to salary, we're also paying people's salaries. We actually took the lease of our Philippines site on ourselves, pre-fund. So we're now leasing a 4-hectare site in the Philippines. So the added pressure of living in Singapore, which is expensive to live, international schools. I'm not sure whether we would have made it, right? Frankly, so was it the right decision? I will never say yes, because that would say I'm suggesting it was okay to be apart from my family. So I will never say yes, but it was an understandable decision. But yeah, it's something that that both hurts and motivates me every day. And my job is to make this successful in whatever success looks like for me. And actually, that's changed. Ward, when I first started, I suspect, like most wannabe entrepreneurs, you just see money, right? I can do this, and in 3 years, I'm going to be a millionaire, whatever, right? One, it doesn't generally work like that. But also, over the last few years, I've gotten a little bit older as well. Time to contemplate, life and the bigger meaning. And for now, success is creating a situation where I can reunite the family. And so, why is that interesting? Because actually, and this, this is not a negative message, I don't think. Even if the business wasn't successful, for me, it's going to be hard to understand that success. Why? Because I'm going back to being my family. So there's no failure anymore for me. And actually, that's quite a refreshing position to be in, right? Because that if you get to the point of there's no failure, then you can try to, I don't know, the process becomes a bit more liberating, because you go, okay, whatever will be, and I'm going to reunite the family in whichever scenario, and therefore that's success, and therefore I'm good to go. The resilience, I think you used the word earlier, that still, you have to still have that every day, right? I mean, I used to say, if you had 5 days of a startup, 4 days would be back, you'd be kicked hard, and 1 day might be okay. And that's pretty switched to now, 3 years on, 3 days are okay and 2 days are still tough a week. And you just have to accept that that's just the way it is, and that's resilience to bounce back the next day. Sometimes I go home and I just want to forget about it for the night, and I do, and then I come back next day and start again. So resilience is key. But the family situation is my personal motivation. And as I said, I feel in such a wonderful position mentally, because whichever way for me now, whether people externally define it as success or not success, I don't really care. For me, I'm clear on what success looks like, and it's no longer money. It is the sole definition of success.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Okay, the final question I have for you, it's quite a broad one, Darren, so answer it any way you feel. But what do you see as the future of the sector?
Look, I think with AI, it's going to change the dynamics, right? Because it's a culmination of what we've seen from the cloud service providers in terms of AZ, and it's taken that, it's a different model, but taking it to another extreme. So with clouds, with the AZ, with the availability zone model, location was incredibly important, because some of them operate free site availability zones. So that there was, and a tier one markets allowed for that. If you think about either larger deployments, so I don't want to make it all about AI, but if you think about even larger deployments, 100 megawatts, 150, 200 megawatts, you've got to go where the renewable power is. You kind of have to, I think. And I know I've said this earlier, but it is a massive shift, because the tier two markets, and I'm not just talking about Asia, I'm not a specialist in Europe at all, but the tier two markets might become the tier one markets of tomorrow. Why? Simply because they had organic renewable energy, right? So I don't think people will be chasing connectivity in the AI model, because you don't need lots of connectivity. I don't think people will be chasing sites in the same way, because actually put it in the middle of nowhere, give me some internet access, and for inference, I'm good to go, right? So that for me is a massive shift is coming in terms of the key decision, the key buying criteria of yesterday, I don't think are going to stay the same tomorrow. And that just opens up the different markets. And so, I'm fascinated to see how, as an industry, kind of culmination of everything we talked about, how we deal with this ever-increasing power requirement in an ever-increasing, and it's not just power, by the way, water. Even I've forgotten to mention water, right? And I'm supposed to care about sustainability. Water arguably is going to be a rarer resource in some of these markets than electricity, right? So how do we, from a utility point of view, allow for the growth of our sector, the physical growth of these buildings and the power coming into them, and be a good corporate citizen? And I don't think, again, there's easy answers to that. I do love the fact, by the way, that the last thing I say, I love the fact, particularly some of the US guys, cloud guys, are starting to share technology, right? Are starting to make it open source. That's the way it's got to be, because this is an industry challenge, not an operator challenge, not a single cloud customer. This is an industry challenge. How do we operate these huge facilities at a way that is not using so much scarce resource that it's just a bad outcome for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Darren, thank you very much for taking the time to join me. Really enjoyed the chat. Really enjoy your, refreshing, open, honest approach. And wish you and the team at Evolution all the best over the coming years.
Thanks, Ward. Thanks for the opportunity. And I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks.